Ooh, what's going on, guys? It's Horse Beef here, and I'm talking about Israel Adesanya again, and a little bit more of the aftermath following his loss to Dricus du Plessis. I do enjoy speaking on these particular topics. Does it have anything to do with my personal feelings towards Israel Adesanya? Maybe just a little bit, but I also just do find it extremely funny, the hypocrisy and the blatant excuse making that's been going on, not really on Israel Adesanya's part, but on the MMA community at large, really, and MMA media. And pretty much, I just wanted to go and show you guys some examples of excuse making on his part and also on the part of others on his behalf, because I do feel like it's pretty egregious, especially when you see all these reactions from fans saying that he's not making excuses, he's just alluding to certain things, right? At the end of the day, any excuse, any admission of an injury after a loss, to me, seems like a bit of an excuse. Otherwise, you would feel no need to bring it up in the first place. But let's get into the tweet that pretty much opened up this big can of worms here. So here we have it, man. Of course, it's going to be a tweet from our favorite resident Israel Adesanya fanboy / stan, Kenny Okoye. You know, we love this guy, as you guys know, on this channel. Big friend of the channel, Kenny Okoye. Says, Pereira suspects Adesanya could have been injured due to his lack of low kicks. Okay. I didn't watch Pereira's video where he speaks on that, but we'll take his word for it. But then we get a response from Israel Adesanya saying, it's weird how this guy knows me. It's like we've spent hours studying each other's moves and fought multiple times or something. I mean that, whatever. So, yeah, in a way, of course, it does seem like Israel Adesanya is now using this opportunity to allude to the idea that he went into that fight injured. Now, of course, as you guys may expect, I am going to include a little clip of Kenny Okoye. Now, I want you guys to pay attention to the elatement on his face when he realizes that he may just have an excuse and or coping mechanism to deal with this recent loss for Israel Adesanya. So let's take a look at that.
It's confirmed. It has been confirmed. It is confirmed that Israel Adesanya was injured in the fight in 305 against Dricus du Plessis. Now,
oh my God, guys, Daddy was injured going into his fight with Dricus du Plessis. Oh my God, he was also apparently injured going to the fight with Sean Strickland, which I'm pretty sure Kenny gets into here as well. So pretty much every time Israel Adesanya is outclassed by an opponent, he must be injured. But are we forgetting the sentiment expressed by his head coach, Eugene Behrman?
But you can laugh. I'm laughing to the bank now because now Dricus don't know where he is on the landscape. Now anything could happen. Now Kamzat gets a good win. Paulo Costa gets a good win. You think they're going to give the next shot to Dricus, who's been sitting on the sidelines doing nothing? So it just goes to show that what I said was true. If you're not willing to fight for an injury and you're sitting too comfortable, thinking you're just going to get the next title shot, you don't know the sport. Your team hasn't been in the sport long enough. They're not smart enough to think this. They can't manipulate the UFC. They're a new team to the UFC.
Imagine bragging that your team gets preferential treatment by the UFC and that you know how to quote-unquote manipulate the UFC, because that pretty much is the admission here. What? Because Dricus didn't want to complete a 6-week turnaround after confirming that he has an injury. So how can that be said, but then injury also be brought up as an excuse for losing a fight? I'm not too sure I understand the logic there. But it is a truly beautiful thing to see the way that Dricus' career has shaped up and the way Izzy's career has shaped up since these interviews from Eugene Behrman. It's absolutely just desserts, in my opinion.
But next part of your
question. Just the argument for the immediate rematch.
That this is the biggest star in the sport. That's the biggest star in the sport right now, you know?
Now, keep in mind, this was right after he was outclassed by Sean Strickland, just after winning the belt back from Alex Pereira. So it was his second reign as middleweight champion, no title defenses, loses it on the first defense, and gets completely shut down for 5 rounds. You'd be generous to give Izzy a round in that fight. So usually after a champion loses a fight so dominantly like that, an immediate rematch is never granted. But of course, the most privileged fighter in the UFC, he's one of the biggest stars, so he deserves an immediate rematch every single time. And Izzy should never be fighting a number one contender fight for the remainder of his career as long as he's still kicking, right? No, absolutely not. Did we see Aljamain Sterling get an immediate rematch against Sean O'Malley despite that fight being stopped. I mean, like some would say it was stopped early. For me, I'm not too sure I agree with that 100%. I think it was an okay stoppage at the end of the day, but you need to pay attention to how dominant and how many title defenses Aljamain Sterling actually racked up before that fight, and then you can try and explain to me why Israel Adesanya deserved an immediate rematch. He simply didn't, and I'm glad he didn't get it. But of course, ended up fighting for the belt in his next fight anyway, which is expected. Now, I'd like to focus on some excuse making that Israel himself makes, and I'm not saying that he's too explicit in terms of how he makes excuses, but there is one very consistent excuse that I keep noticing, and I'll just play a couple of examples for you guys and then go over it.
Not what you wanted to happen, but in the lead up to the fifth fight, where did you feel like you were at?
The fifth round, I was up, and he hurt my perineal nerve, so that's why my footwork wasn't as sharp as I wanted it to be. So I was trying to find ways to get off the fence, but my feet kept on dragging. My left foot kept on dragging, and that's why I tripped that one time as well. It was really annoying, but yeah, it is what it is.
Like, you know, I was rocked as my foot. And again, you know the perineal nerve when you get happened to Michael Chandler,
happened to DJ Cejudo, yeah.
What's his name? I was moving, and then my right ankle rolled, and I tripped as he was throwing. So
I have to watch it again because I don't think I was rocked. I think I slipped, and I was like, what the fuck was that?
So one thing about Izzy that we know is that he's not the type to make excuses and not the type to be like, oh, this happened, that.
So it appears to me as if Israel Adesanya is impervious to being rocked, and every time that he has shown some kind of vulnerable state throughout his career, guys, it's the perennial nerve, right? Even though he didn't get drop foot or really even roll his ankle in that example that he tried to prove that he rolled his ankle, and it didn't even look like he rolled his ankle in that picture, even though he zoomed into it. Like, just because you say it doesn't mean that that's what happened. I don't know, man. It just seems like a bit of a cope to me, and this is why in my video that I made last time about this particular topic, I said that I believe that Izzy gave up his back because he prefers getting choked out rather than getting knocked out, and I believe that this type of mentality is not exactly proven, but it's supported by his own words, right? He can never admit to being rocked by his opponents, even against Alex Pereira, which he was clearly rocked in.
Did Izzy confirm he was hurt? Yes, he confirmed he was hurt. Did he use it as some kind of crutch or some kind of excuse of like, oh yeah, by the way, this is what happened?
Well, you see, Izzy doesn't have to do anything like that when he has fans like you who will do it for him, and, well, he knows that.
And honestly, it's frustrating because knowing how heavy Dricus was on his front leg, and we know if Izzy would have just compromised that, it would have been finished. It would have been an easy victory for Izzy. Because, like, if Dricus has no front leg, that blitz becomes 10 times more predictable. The already predictable blitz by Dricus is going to come way more predictable after this. And it's just frustrating that we just didn't get to see that from Izzy.
So why are we now assuming that Dricus du Plessis was in 100% perfect health going to this fight? Right? Just because Izzy says he's injured, somehow that's now an excuse to be made for him. And like, oh, thank God, that's why he wasn't throwing leg kicks. Oh, that's why he got chased down and choked out like a little bitch. That's why he didn't even think for a second to to go out on his shield and get choked out, man. He tapped almost instantaneously. No. Israel Adesanya has no heart, and odds are that both of them went into this fight injured, because you would be hard pressed to find a fighter who goes into a fight 100% healthy after a grueling training camp, hard sparring. Even if it's not hard sparring in general, you can scuff a kick, hyperextend your ankle. Really, anything can happen, man. I've personally trained, not extensively, but I've trained to an extent for an amateur bout in the past that never materialized. But even then, I end up with all types of injuries, and it wasn't even a long, crazy, grueling camp like professional athletes go through, man. And I still have lingering injuries, man. I train almost every single day, and I'm training almost every single day with injuries. And like I said, I'm not an elite athlete going through a grueling camp before every single fight. So if I'm getting injured, then there's a good chance that most of these fighters have niggling injuries, because of course they're going to have niggling injuries if they're professional athletes and they're putting their body through wear and tear each and every day. So this excuse for Israel Adesanya is not valid. Just because Dricus isn't making it explicitly clear that he has an injury does not mean that he doesn't have an injury. And also, it should not even matter, because like I showed before, Eugene Behrman doesn't think it should matter, unless of course it could be used to prop up Izzy in some way.
What did you think of, we'll start with Israel, right? What did you think of his performance? I think some people are saying he looked very flat early on. He looked like he sort of didn't deal with the pressure Sean was giving him very well. What did you think of Israel?
Israel looked like he was in slow motion. He looked like he couldn't get off.
No, Izzy couldn't get off it. Maybe because there were no dogs present in the arena.
He looked like he was really stiff tonight. He looked very slow.
In case you're unaware, this was the post-fight press conference after the Izzy versus Sean Strickland title fight. And it's just insane, man, the words coming out of Dana's mouth here, because like I said before, Israel Adesanya doesn't have to make excuses because everybody jumps to make excuses for him. How is he supposed to take accountability for anything when this is how the MMA world reacts to any of his losses? It's pretty ridiculous, honestly, and I, in a way, feel bad for Izzy, and it does kind of shed some light on his weak mentality, because if his boss is even a yes man for him, then what does that say about the people surrounding him as well? He really must just be surrounded by complete yes men. But also to touch on what Dana White just said, no, Izzy did not look stiff or slow in that fight whatsoever. He looked like he couldn't do anything because he could not figure out Sean Strickland, and it's really just as simple as that.
Do you think that could be, we always talk about his activity, but maybe there's something to be said that he might be overtrained at this point and maybe needs some time off? Or do you think it's just, hey, sometimes you have a bad night?
Only Israel knows what's going on. I'm very curious to see what he says at this press conference tonight.
I love how this reporter frames the question with built-in answers pretty much for Dana White to continue this excuse-making spree for the loss to Sean Strickland. Like, what's the point of making a fight, Dana White, if you can't accept the result if it goes one way? It's a bad look for the company if you're vehemently jumping to defend a fighter after he gets completely shut down for 5 rounds. Oh, it must be an injury. It must be some outside factor, right? Something like that. But no, just accept it for what it is. Israel Adesanya lost the fight, and he touches dogs inappropriately. Now, I wanted to focus on another YouTuber / creator out there, Lawrence Kenshin from Striking Breakdowns. Now, you very well probably have heard of him if you're involved in the MMA or combat sports world in some way, shape, or form. He does make, or he has made, some of the highest quality striking breakdowns that I've ever seen personally. But I remembered back, and when I used to use Instagram, I no longer use Instagram, but I used to use it. I was scrolling, I followed Lawrence Kenshin, and I saw this string of posts where he was coping or defending Israel Adesanya after that loss to Sean Strickland and theorizing as to what percentage he was at during the fight and taking all credit away from Sean Strickland. Now, these are the posts right here. And reading over these might provide a pretty good laugh here. So let's take a look at the first one. So then he posts like a little clip of people practicing this modified Philly shell that Sean Strickland came into the fight with Izzy and all of his fights with. It's a very effective defensive style. But then the next paragraph down, he says, assuming Izzy was 100%, do you guys think it really works against the sharpest striker in MMA? So once again, theorizing that Israel Adesanya was not at 100%, but then he gets even more egregious with his coping for Izzy's loss in the next one here. Now, the font is a little bit pixelated here, but I'll do my best to read the second one for you. But this is 22-year-old unrefined Izzy. His explosiveness and shot selection would improve dramatically in both kickboxing and MMA. 2 years later, he'd start fighting the best in the world. Respect to Sean Strickland's strategy, but a completely upright posture with a something Philly shell is not untouchable defense. Far less accurate strikers hit Strickland. Strickland did not all of a sudden become a defensive genius. Now, I find it very interesting to see a supposed master of breaking down striking use MMA math to rationalize his position. Don't you guys find that interesting? So right away, Lawrence Kenshin, you're supposed to be the striking breakdown expert, right? But of course, when it comes to breaking down a fight that Israel Adesanya loses, you become a coping expert at the end of the day, right? And it's a little bit pathetic here. The second paragraph is pretty bad, might get even worse. Izzy has fought much sharper offensive and defensive fighters throughout his career, and his movement patterns were very different in this fight. There's a big list of things I could point out. I'm sure many coaches and fighters could do the same. Team Adesanya is being very classy and giving all the credit to Team Strickland. I mean, we've kind of gone over that, and it's maybe maybe not the case, but as someone who has called Izzy's rise and studied his patterns early on, I believe that's his patterns, I'm calling it as I see it. Many things were off with Izzy. I'll leave it to combat sports doctors to point it out. Then he adds a few combat sports doctors, I can only assume they are. So big pathetic cope there from Lawrence Kenshin. And I'm surprised that no one's ever covered this in particular. But I guess these posts were only made on Instagram, so you would have only seen them if you were following Lawrence Kenshin a year ago. And I'm glad I remembered, because I reinstalled Instagram just to be a petty bastard and cover these Instagram posts. And I'm glad I did it, honestly, because reading them back, man, they are pathetic, I must say. Now, the last one here might be my favorite. This is Izzy in 2016. The post pertains to one of his kickboxing matches with Alex Pereira and only shows the highlights where Israel Adesanya is having success against Pereira. But he says, this is Izzy in 2016 with Pereira being made out of titanium with freak KO power. Adesanya still has no trouble going into the fire in this fight. It's also a completely different sport there, Lawrence Kenshin. It's MMA, where there are multiple different variables, and there's also the threat of the takedown. So, this point makes absolutely no sense, right? It's also not the first time he faced the Philly guard. Izzy knows it very well. According to how he performed against Sean Strickland, maybe he's not an expert when it comes to dealing with the Philly shell, right? And it's just crazy that this is Lawrence Kenshin, right? The most renowned striking breakdown guy pretty much on the internet, really. Joe Rogan gives him a shout out. Israel Adesanya has given him a shout out, right? So I guess maybe that could explain why he's so partial towards Israel Adesanya. I guess that would explain it, but it doesn't make it any less pathetic to me. But let's get on to the bullet points here. What's different about Izzy? Explosive jab, continuous bursts leading to right hands, smashing through the Philly, even shots on the guard send Pereira back. Okay, rotation on the right low kick, threat of a right high kick, big blitzing and jumping attacks in southpaw, repeated right hands as Pereira pressures, continuous combos when Philly shell is in use. Okay, I feel like I don't have to say this, right? But apparently I do, because Lawrence Kenshin forgets all of his abilities to break down fights when it comes to breaking down and being nonpartisan about an Israel Adesanya loss, okay? But this is a different sport, right? You're covering a kickboxing match from 2016 of Israel Adesanya and comparing his performance back in 2016 to a performance from 2023 in a completely different sport, in which he's in his mid-30s at this point, right? So Israel Adesanya is not even in his prime anymore. Why are we acting like just because it was 2016 and he's supposed to, in theory, have improved big time since then, but you're comparing two completely different sports and his performances in those two completely different sports as a way to support this idea that Izzy wasn't at 100%. But like I said, it gets even worse. In the fight against Strickland, we saw Izzy almost exclusively on the back foot. Okay, so that's kind of been a consistent theme throughout Izzy's MMA career, though, hasn't it? Isn't he always on the back foot? He was on the back foot against Jared Cannonier, and just exclusively through jabs and leg kicks for the entirety of the fight. He was on the back foot against even Paulo Costa, right? And during their fight, he was on the back foot against Robert Whittaker, pretty much both of their fights. I don't know if I said Yoel Romero, but yes, him too. Vittori, he is a counter striker. And he always is on the back foot in MMA. Yes, in kickboxing, right, he was more aggressive. I remember watching Izzy's fights and his highlights, when he got signed to the UFC, and thinking, wow, this dude's a very good striker. But when he came into the UFC and got into title contention, his style changed up big time, and he became a lot safer and really, began fighting off the back foot almost exclusively. But let's continue here. He had trouble closing the distance and landing any significant strike. Okay, give credit to Strickland for that, maybe, and his impeccable defense, which you like to deny. Team Strickland approached with great strategy. There we go. And Strickland is certainly good, but not so good to completely shut down Izzy like this at 100%. Oh my goodness, man. I keep saying it, but this is so pathetic. In my opinion, Izzy was far from being 100%. He was maybe at 30 to 40. So this guy knows Izzy so well, right? He studied him, he studied his pattern so much that he can somehow quantify what percentage Izzy was at based off of his performance. Please, Lawrence Kenshin, get over yourself with this kind of shit. This is just like some of the most pretentious bullshit I've ever heard when it comes to fight breakdowns. It's absolutely terrible to read. I know I'm not alone after speaking to several world-class coaches and fighters. You know you're not alone. It sounds like he was really going through it after this loss against Sean Strickland. Still looking forward to your assessments. And then he adds the same doctors as he did in his last post. So once again puts pressure on these fight doctors, I guess, to assess the fight and pretty much confirm what he's been saying in all of his posts. I'm not too sure if these doctors ended up doing exactly what Lawrence Kenshin was expecting, but at the end of the day, it matters not whichever way it goes. But I did want to cover that, and ultimately I do also want to say that I like Lawrence Kenshin's content for the most part. I think, like I said, he makes some of the best breakdowns on YouTube, but this was just a straight swing and a miss, and I believe takes away some credibility from Lawrence Kenshin in a way, at least from my perspective. I haven't really watched many of his videos, if he's really posted much since then, but I actually went on his Instagram and looked at his recent feed, and he hasn't posted a single thing ever since Dricus beat Izzy, so that might show the frame of mind he's in, but I will be keeping a lookout just in case, and god damn it, you know that I will take the opportunity to make another video about the Izzy coping going around in the MMA space right now. But that pretty much wraps up my thoughts on the situation. If you'd like to see me cover similar topics going forward, please let me know in the comment section below. I know that, of course, the bulk of my channel has thus far surrounded like real MMA content, like making tier lists and top 10s and all that stuff, and talking about fighters and the actual fighting aspect of MMA, right? But ultimately, dude, at a certain point, you do start to run out of ideas, and talking about current events does become a pretty viable option. So I will be doing more of this going forward, but I won't be abandoning the typical horse beef videos. But anyway, guys, I do appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next one.